where I play, as long as I go number one in the draft.
From the Erie Otters, Connor McDavid.
From the London Knights, Mitch Marner.
From the Western Hockey League's Brandon Wheat Kings, Nolan Patrick.
This is Tracking the Draft with Craig Button.
He checks an enormous amount of boxes. Nobody in this draft did more with less. I absolutely love him. It's not his skills that anybody's concerned about. It's that playing attitude. And quite frankly, it's really poor.
Speeding towards the future of the NHL.
From the U.S. Development Program, Jacob Truba.
From Färjestad of the Swedish Elite League, Jonas Brodin.
From the Boston U Terriers, Brady Tkachuk.
He could play in the NHL next year. He's one of those guys.
Here's your host, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Tracking the Draft with Craig Button. The director of scouting for TSN will be along very shortly. My name is Dean Millard. It is great to have you here on Season 3, Episode 3, where the stars of tomorrow are discovered and discussed right here. On the show today, you can see the names on the screen. Conor Geekie is our top shelf talent. Ryan Chesley is our next wave candidate, and we will look ahead in the time machine to the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors and the World Junior Championship with a discussion about Shane Wright. Canada unveiled its selection camp today. We will get Craig's thoughts on that as well. And Craig will join us on the UFWJ hotline. Check out www.uffsports.com. You can find out about the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. You can find out about the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. And you can find out how you can become a scout and track the same players that Craig Button does and other scouts do in our platform. There are many, and there are many successful ones. We'll tell you all about it as we go, but you can list players for as low as $20 sometimes and then sell them to UFHL franchises for big cash. This show being broadcast on Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, your one-stop shop for fantasy sports. So we would love to have you join the network if you have a daily, monthly, weekly, whatever kind of show you have. If it's related to fantasy sports, we would love to chat. We have some big things planned with our programming and AO Sports, IKS Media helping us out. It is going to be really off the charts, and the time is now to get on the train before it leaves the station. All right, so we're going to be talking about these three players on the program today. Conor Geekie of the Winnipeg Ice, Ryan Chesley of the U.S. National Team Development Program, and in Time Machine, it's Shane Wright of Team Canada. He was on the selection camp list. He will be on the roster. We will discuss all of that when Craig Button joins us on the other side of this.
Here he is, the director of scouting for TSN, former GM of the Calgary Flames, and a Stanley Cup champion with the Dallas Stars. Plus, he's a sharp-dressed man with a heart of gold and a passion to match it. Craig Button.
Craig, the World Juniors, and now, of course, the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. Such a big, big thing in Canada, and not just the tournament. We debate about the selection of the camp roster, and I'll tell you, the debate was raging in the UFWJ chat and the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Hockey chat that was going on today. And sometimes we focus on the names that aren't there instead of the names that are there, and we'll get to some of those names. But some of the names that didn't make the roster that got a lot of attention were Matthew and Carter Savoy. Let's just start with those two guys. Surprised that either of them did not get selected for this camp.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, Matthew Savoy is a 17-year-old player, and this is a 19-year-old tournament. And you know, I always say this to young players. Number one, you know what? Go and play. Hockey Canada is watching all the time. They are thorough in their evaluations. And if well and get yourself on the radar, that's the most important thing. I mean, Matthew has played very, very well. And certainly, his performance in the Western Hockey League, puts him in a category of real good players available for the 2022 draft. But this isn't about the 2022 draft. It's not about potential players going forward in their NHL careers. This is about 10 days. It's about 10 days at the World Junior Tournament and what players give you the best opportunity to compete for a gold medal. And Matthew Savoy is a really good young player. Dave Cameron reminded me at the selection camp announcement that he was head coach in 11 World Junior when they had to go through the same process with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was the first overall pick in that draft. He was not on that team. So, for Matthew Savoy to not be on that team is not surprising at all. Number 2, Carter Savoy. Carter Savoy is a real good goal scorer. He's shown that at college. He's shown that in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. But you start to look at players that they named to this roster. You start to look at players they didn't name, and Carter certainly belongs in that group. I mean, one of the beautiful things about hockey in Canada is the wealth of talent. And Carter's very talented. But ultimately, when you start to look at how they want to form their team, and this is the question, okay, fine, whose place is he going to take? And you could make that argument about a dozen players. And now your camp is 47 players instead of 35. And with a 4-day camp, 2 days of practices, 2 games versus the U Sports teams, you don't have time. The selection process is already underway. And now the finalization of the roster is what's going to take place in the 4 days. That's not by choice. It's by requirement. The teams have to go in quarantine on December for 2 days. All the teams have to be named. Hockey Canada would like to have a longer evaluation camp, but they can't because of the requirements in place with the protocols necessary with COVID. So when I say the selection process is well underway, the selection camp is really the final roster selection. It's not really what you would say is an opportunity for players to go and show what they're capable of doing to help the team. Hockey Canada has a pretty good idea of that. And so Carter falls into a category of some really talented, skilled players, but he's in a large group that they get invited. Now you asked me about Brian Clark. I'm going to ask you a question. What does Shakir Mukhamadullin, Jan Kuznetsov, Kirill Kirsanov, and Daniel Shaika have in common?
Their country?
Yeah, one. Number 2 is the Russian 2002 born group dominated the 2002 born group. U16, U17, Halinka Gretzky. They were the favorites for the U18 gold medal. That tournament got canceled because of COVID. Last year at the World Junior Tournament, had all 4 of those defensemen playing in the tournament as 18-year-old players. Russia didn't get a medal. And for Hockey Canada, it's all about what gives us the best opportunity to compete for a gold medal. Brant Clark's a really good player. There's no question about it. But much like those 4 Russian defensemen that I just named, really good, and Brant Clark's really good, it's a 19-year-old tournament. And when you start to look at it, this isn't about potential. This isn't about where you got picked in the draft. This is about 10 days. 10 days, I'm going to keep mentioning that. And, they've watched Brant Clark. They know what Brant Clark can do. And then you're managing it the other players. And you're managing it knowing who your competition is going to be and what the challenges may be. And, there's a big difference between being 18 defensemen in this tournament and a 19-year-old defenseman. It's rare for 18-year-old defensemen to be in this tournament. And, yes, I mentioned the Russians last year, because a real strong team again this year with those defensemen returning as 19-year-olds. They didn't help them win a gold medal last year. And as good as Brant Clark is with respect to potential, the feeling is that he's not quite ready. And Dean, it's a cottage industry in Canada to talk about players that aren't selected for the national teams, which is a beautiful thing because we have so many good players and there's always these debates and discussions that go back and forth. But at the end of it all, yeah, I look at over the years, and I've seen this happen lots. Where we talk about good players that didn't make the team, they get selected. And last year, people may not recall this, but same things we said about Seth Jarvis. How can they not keep Seth Jarvis? How can they not keep Seth Jarvis? They didn't keep Seth Jarvis, and at the end of the tournament, people say, "Oh, they could have used Seth Jarvis." Yeah, you can say that. That team rolled through the tournament. They were great, and this is the decisions that hockey can make, and they make them with a wealth and depth of information and knowledge on these players that, quite frankly, nobody else has.
And you know what? It's wonderful that we are debating these players now, because we'll be doing the same thing when the cuts are made and this and that. And that's, you mentioned it. It is a wonderful, it's an honor as a Canadian to be able to cheer for a country that has that much depth. And we joke about it all the time. We could send 2 teams and it could compete. So I think it's a great thing to do, just like we debate the draft and rankings, and we can all, that's the beautiful thing about living in this free country, is that we can all have our opinions on players and lists and teams, and it's beautiful. And we're doing it now with Conor Geekie, who plays on that Winnipeg Ice team that is so very good. Spitfire scouting, not surprising. Dale Hardy grabbed this player, this centerman. 7 goals, 22 assists in 23 games, and you have him ranked 11. And I'm going to get to see, I will get to see him in person when I'm back at Christmas, as the Winnipeg Ice will be in Brandon for a game. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in person for the first time. But what is it about Conor Geekie that strikes you first when you watch him play?
Okay. So quickly, you better give me a scouting report. 2 guys. You better give me a scouting report on Matthew Savoy and on Conor Geekie.
Done.
Let me go to a comparable type. He when I watch Conor play, when I go back to when this player was playing junior hockey, and that's Logan Couture. Logan Couture had size. He was range, see that he was growing into his body, and pulling all the different pieces together with respect to coordination as you're adjusting to growth and physical maturity. And I see a lot of that in Conor Geekie. I see a game that's similar to Logan Couture. Back to Conor wants to attack, and he wants to push into the demanding hard areas. He's not interested in playing where it doesn't matter. One of the things that we would, that a term that gets used a little bit more, and I'm hearing it more often, is soft skill versus hard skill. And Logan Couture has hard skill. And I think when I watch Conor Geekie, his determination to be on the puck in traffic, to find a way to get the puck to the net, to always be looking to find a way, what I call, you got to be able to attack the middle. You got to be able to, play in the middle of the ice and push your way there. The opponents are defend area hard. But when you want to attack that area and you have real willingness and an initiative, you're going to get opportunities, and that's what I see in Conor. I see, the rounding out and continuous development in his skating, and I think that there's a lot of room for that to continue to improve. I don't see it as a weakness. I just see it as an area that you gotta just continue to evaluate how much can it improve. But I think that Logan Couture, there was questions about Logan Couture's skating heading into his draft year. And I think that those are always there's always going to be elements of a player's game that you go, okay, what would be, an area that he has to improve? You ask me that all the time. Mm-hmm. And I differentiate between what I call inherent weaknesses and developmental weaknesses. I think when it comes to Conor's development, we're looking at something that's very much developmental. And, the maturity is going to go there. He has a really good ability to move laterally, to open up his hands and to get shots off. What's really deceptive, I think, is the 7 goals. Because I've seen him play a few times this year where he was dangerous. He had grade A scoring chances, quality scoring chances in the inner slot area, and he just didn't finish on them. But when players are getting those opportunities and they're working to get those opportunities, and I think that Conor has the ability to finish on those opportunities, he just hasn't been able to do it to this point in time. But I think he's got a lot of real significant qualities to continue to build on and to be, when we look at centermen like Conor Geekie, those types of centermen like are coveted. Dean, NHL teams are not building their center ice with 5'9" and 5'10" centers. They just aren't. No, nobody wants to do that. When Conor, when you look at the physical stature of him and the skills and the willingness, he's got skill and he's got will and he's got intelligence. And I think he's got a lot of room for improvement. And so, there's lots to like about Conor Geekie. And like any other player in the draft, you're going to hear about the good and, what does this concern? Like, you know what? That's where you balance it out. Okay, this player fits here in your mind. Somebody might fit someplace else in somebody else's mind. But I think Conor Geekie has real good, strong NHL potential.
Well, and skating, I've said it a lot. I think skating is one of the, not that it's easy, but of all the skills in hockey, it's the one that you really can work on and get technical and improve. And the list is long of guys that are even in the Hall of Fame. Luc Robitaille was never considered a great skater, but he could score goals, and guys have improved their skating so that they can be a valuable NHL player or a Hall of Famer. And when you talk about size, I know one of your favorite quotes is, "I don't scout with the tape measure," but he does have that size, and having that size is one thing. Using that size is another thing, and using it, and I'm not saying you have to steamroll, but protection of the puck, as you mentioned. The one thing I think you bring up a lot is that you could be a really high goal scorer even at midget, and then you get to the WHL level and the goalies are better. Or you could be a really great goal scorer at the WHL level, then you get to the NHL and the goalies are that even better. So maybe it's that he's going to be a really good goal scorer. It's just taking him because I think he scored almost 50 in one of his midget years for the Yellowhead Chiefs. So I wonder if that's a case with this guy, that he's just going to almost figure out how to beat the goaltenders as his shot evolves.
Well, and I think he's got deception, Dean, and like when he moves into the scoring area. I mean, you run into times where, despite your best efforts, and doing everything right, those players that wear the goaltender pads and the blocker and the glove, they're trying to stop you from scoring. And like I said, I go by what I've seen from Conor, and I've seen him get those chances. There's three areas of goal scoring that I worry about with young players in junior hockey. Number one, are you bigger and stronger where you can just power goalies from distance? That's number one. You're not going to overpower goalies from distance in the NHL. They're too good, right? Number two, are you just skating by opponents, and scoring goals? But I talk about him attacking inside, right? Like, he attacks inside. He attacks what I call into the heart of the matter. And, with Conor, like, that's what you look for. A lot of guys, they can move to a certain spot and they can beat a goalie because the goalies aren't as technically sound with their skating. And then the other area is that you get in and around the net. You overwhelm people because you're so much bigger and stronger at this age. And what you have to be able, and it's a cautionary tale. It's not a prohibitive tale, but it's a cautionary tale. Okay, is that player going to be able to find the puck in and around the net? And I'll give you an example of a guy who was a first-round draft pick, Kirby Reichel. Kirby Reichel was strong, and he was physical, and he was hungry around the net, and he competed. And you looked at it and you said, okay, he finds pucks around the net, or he scores around the net in that area. Well, the problem with Kirby is he couldn't do it at the NHL level because he couldn't overpower. He wasn't quick enough. He wasn't powerful enough to overpower defensemen that are positioning themselves really well around the net. His hands weren't quick enough. And thus you have a player, despite being a first-round draft pick, and teams are looking to try to develop that promise, not able to do it.
There you go. Okay, let's go from the top shelf to the next wave and focus on a blue liner, Ryan Chesley, with the U.S. National Team Development Program that plays in the USHL. Trevor Zimmer snagged this as a scout. 1 assist in 5 games this year, ranked 44. And so this is a player that a lot of people that, maybe don't watch as much hockey, they might just look at the statistics and say, what is it about this player that is attractive? Which is, I think, a terrible thing to do when it comes to scouting. It's not the worst thing to do when you're trying to find out about a player, but judging a player based solely on statistics is a terrible way to scout, in my opinion. So tell us about the aspects of Ryan Chesley's game that gets you excited.
Well, number one, skating. When Ryan is able to, he's got some real good jump in his skating, and that jump is used to beat pressure, going back for pucks in the defensive zone. He can open up enough little space for himself to make that outlet pass. He will jump into the attack in transition, and once he gets into the offensive zone, he looks for opportunities to, be that reinforcement offensively. The other thing too about the stats, I mean, you get stats from the USHL, but Ryan with the National Team Development Program plays in a lot of international games, and then they play against college teams too in their draft year. So those don't always get factored in. And Ryan has the ability to provide offense. He has the ability to be a real good, solid defenseman. Behind his the blue line in his own zone. So when I watch Ryan Chesley play, you see this player that's got like a relative completeness to his game. And I know that people are different than other players. You start to look and go, oh, geez, he's not doing as much as we think. Well, were you realistic in your expectations? Or are you realistic in terms of how you're assessing the player and what his abilities are? Or are you just being disappointed because it's easy to look at the stat sheet? I think Ryan Chesley's a real solid player. I think that like a lot of players going into the draft, they want to perform every game to the very best of their abilities. They know they're being watched, Dean. They know that NHL scouts are in the building and assessing them. They look at the rankings. They know everything going on. But at the same time, I think that, for the players are going to have good games. They're going to have games where they wish they were a little bit better. They're going to have games that they just would rather forget. And that's just part of the process. And that's why you got to watch players over a period of time. But that's why when I say with Ryan Chesley, like, what are you disappointed in? Are you disappointed in his skating? Do you think his skating won't project to the NHL? Are you disappointed in his decision making? Do you think that he doesn't make right plays in any of the zones? Or are you disappointed in his hand skills with respect to passing and delivering the puck? Or, tell me what you're disappointed in, because the stat sheet just tells you what that has been. And it just tells you, hey, this is a snapshot. But the player, it doesn't tell you if he's a good skater. I think Ryan Chesley has the ability to be a defenseman. Like, when I look at him at this age, what I see is I see a lot of what Jeff Petrie, when he's playing at the top of his game, brings to the Montreal Canadiens. And Jeff Petrie was a second-round draft pick, and certainly a player that's been a really good NHL player, real solid NHL player. That right now, that would be the comparable type player that I would use for Ryan Chesley, because Jeff Petrie can skate, he can shoot the puck, he can pass the puck. Is he a Norris Trophy candidate? No. Is he a first-team All-Star candidate? No. But you need good players. Mm-hmm. Jeff Petrie's a really good player, and I think Ryan Chesley tracks as potentially being a really good NHL defenseman, a real solid NHL defenseman.
And he's, he's gone to some really good programs, from Shattuck St. Mary. Now he's with the U.S. program. I believe he's going to Minnesota. And, you had me at skating. If I have a defenseman that can skate really well, if we've always talked, if you're going to be a top pairing guy, you're going to have to do a lot of different things. You can be a second pairing guy and not have to be a totally offensive point producing guy, which he still could end up being. I think that, if you're going to be a top four guy, you got to skate really, really well, because you're going to be playing a lot of those minutes. And that's what I got excited about, is the fact that, this guy and the Jeff Petrie comparison, really, really like that.
Yeah. Well, Jeff's a very solid, productive player. Mm-hmm. And to me, would everybody like to have a number one defenseman? Yeah, except they're rare. Would everybody like to have a top pair defenseman? Well, if you look at it the right way, there's potential for 30 or 64 top pair defensemen. There's only 32 if you take out number one. Dean, you know this. There's not 32 number one defensemen. There's not 64 top pair defensemen. So you need second pair defensemen. You need players that can play in different spots in your lineup on the blue line. And it's critically important, because the number ones are real obvious. The top pairs are really obvious. The challenge is there's just not that many of them.
That's exactly it. Well, Craig joins us on the UFWJ hotline. The Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors is the first World Junior Dynasty League. Just 10 franchises, just like there were only 10 countries in the World Junior Championship. All have been sold, soon will be branded, and then the draft December 18th and 19th. Follow along on Twitter at the UFWJ. Check out www.uffsports.com for more information. This year, you can own the World Juniors with Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors, and really excited about this venture that we are officially a part of, along with Ian Constable, who I know is excited to work with you because he's a big Flames fan, and we'll have a strategy session coming soon. And I know the one guy that we're going to be talking about in our Time Machine segment is going to come up, not only because he's a terrific player, but he's also a member of High Level Scouting, which helps us out. And we're talking about Shane Wright today when it comes to the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. Of course, a part of the selection camp today. And, I asked you one time about Shane Wright and how he might adjust to the U18s right before that U18s. And he really dominated. He was terrific. There was absolutely no adjustment needed. What will this tournament be like for Shane Wright? Do you expect something similar? Are those, we talk about expectations a lot of times with your players. Are your expectations the same thing at that U18 as they are for this World Juniors, Craig?
No, they aren't, and that's not a criticism. That's not anything negative about Shane Wright. Shane scored 39 goals as a 15-year-old when he got exceptional status coming into the Ontario Hockey League. He didn't play before. You think about the amount of time that he hadn't played. It was well over a year. He didn't play any games, and he goes to the U18 and he dominates. He was at the World Junior Camp last year in Red Deer, and they had over 40 players at that camp, and we know what happened with the quarantine, and then they had to come out of it and make some quick decisions on players. And I think that hurt Shane. I'm not suggesting that he would have made the team, but the experience of being there and being around those players and then watching it and then going to the U18 and having success, coming to the summer camp with the World Junior team, those are all going to benefit him. But here's the biggest thing when I say about Shane Wright, okay? Like, he doesn't have to be the frontline guy. I think at the U18, he had to be that guy because he was that guy. And going into the World Junior Tour, there's a lot of skill there. There's a lot of good players around him that can take some of the burden away from Shane Wright. Shane Wright is no shrinking violet. Shane Wright wants to be at the front of the line. He wants to be a difference maker. But because of the completeness of Shane Wright's game, he can be a difference maker in multiple ways. And the other thing about the World Junior team, we talk about the selection process, is whenever you're selecting players for Team Canada, you have to, as a player, understand that you may be asked to do different things. You may be asked to play a different role. You may be asked to play a different position. Shane Wright will embrace, being a third-line center. He'll embrace playing on the right wing. He'll embrace being a penalty killer because he's got that completeness to his game where he can excel in all those areas. And, can he handle the puck? Can he shoot the puck? Can he create offensive chances? Yeah, he can. But this is not a one-trick pony. This is not a two-trick pony. This is a multiple-trick pony. And when you're building your team and you have a player that's as intelligent and as competitive as Shane Wright with the qualities that he possesses, he's going to find a way to impact the game. And he's going to find a way to impact the game at its most important times. And I think that all the experiences that he's had here over the last, 18 months, two years, going back to when he came into the OHL as a 15-year-old, are going to really well going into this tournament. But I don't think it all has to be on his shoulders. I don't think it was all on his shoulders at the U18, but he was the man. He was the guy. He doesn't have to be the guy at this World Junior team. But that doesn't mean that he can't be a real significant contributor in different ways as the situations demand and as the tournament unfolds.
Okay, as for the guy, we said we would talk about some of the guys that are there. Kent Johnson, is that the guy you think for Canada? And there could be many, but is that the guy on the blue line? Another Michigan, Owen Power. Is it like the twin towers of Wolverine power this year for Canada?
Well, and you got to keep in mind that, Owen and Kent, come to the World Junior team from the University of Michigan, knowing that for the first time in 9 meetings, that the Wolverine football team emerged victorious against the Ohio State Buckeyes. So they're coming in with a lot of pride. The game wasn't played last year, so Kent and Owen, as University of Michigan student athletes, they only know Wolverine victory. So, I kid that because I'm a Wolverine guy and, I'm a huge backer of the Wolverines. So it was great for me to watch that game against Ohio State because I haven't had a lot of joy in the previous 8 meetings. But I think that Kent, I really believe that Kent can have a similar type impact that Trevor Zegras had for Team USA last season, leading them to the gold medal. Trevor was the MVP. And that's not to say that Kent will be the MVP, but Trevor has a tremendous skill set and, the creativity, the mind speed, the ability to operate in tight quarters. Kent has that type of creativity, has that type of magic. And, when you talk about players of that ilk, they find ways to get the job done. They find different ways to combat what other teams are doing to try to stop them. And I think that Kent can have a real significant influence on the outcomes for Team Canada, and not just in the group play, but certainly when they get into the important playoff and medal round games.
And the debate will rage on until the tournament is over and Canada is victorious. And the people that said they could win with any team were right, or they didn't win. And the people that said this guy, listen, my dad still holds a grudge against Brent Sutter because he cut a couple of 50-goal Wheat Kings in 2005 when they had one of the best World Junior teams of all time. So everybody is allowed to debate. It's the beautiful thing about this country, just like we will do for the draft. And we'll get more and more into the World Juniors and the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors as we get closer to camp kicking off. Craig, thanks so much, as always, for joining us on the show, and enjoy the debate running up to the selection camp.
Well, the debate, and the debates are great. I mean, and you, another Brandon Wheat King, was your father disappointed that Ray Ferraro never got an invite to the World? He had 50 goals.
Yeah.
He had 108 that year when the season completed. He had 50 prior to the selection camp. So, if Ray Ferraro, who was a prolific goal scorer, top 1 time in NHL goal scoring, can't get invited, I think that Ray should have the biggest complaint about not being invited of anybody ever in the history of the World Junior team.
Great stuff, Craig. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
This is a serious message.
Craig Button joins us on the Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports Hotline. Become a scout and make money while providing prospects to the Ultimate Franchise Hockey League.
What you talking about, mister?
Pay that man his money. I'm your huckleberry.
Check out the details at www.uffsports.com.
It's serious. I like it a lot. I said we got a winner.
UFFS. You own the game.
All right, another amazing, fun, knowledgeable, and passionate conversation with Craig Button, who is not only an analyst for the World Junior Championship, he's a part owner of the franchise that myself, Ian Constable, and Craig all part own in Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. We will be unveiling our country's flag and name this Friday on UFHL, as well as some more countries that'll be participating in Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. So you don't want to miss that, and you don't want to miss following this tournament. We are obviously relying on Craig to pick us the best team, but Ian and I will have some input on, especially with the scoring system and how the dynasty works. But it's going to be so much fun. And also, Craig and I will be doing something called Craig's Council throughout the year. We do it once at the midpoint, once at the end point. Maybe we'll do it at the quarter point as well. We just started this season. But that's where it's going to be called Craig's Council. And if you have a question about scouting, if you want to know about a story, about a specific player, scouting and story time, Craig's Council is what we call it. And if you have a question for Craig about the draft, about how to scout a player, about a specific player that he has scouted, he was also a GM in the NHL. He won a Stanley Cup with the Dallas Stars, a director of player personnel. Email us, trackingthedraft@gmail.com. Simple. trackingthedraft@gmail.com, and we will add that to the list of topics when we do Craig's Council. More great programming coming your way on UFSN. If you would like to get in touch, it's UFSN@UFFsports.com. That is UFSN@UFFsports.com. That is going to wrap things up for us on the program today. Once again, we spoke about Conor Geekie, center with the Winnipeg Ice, the Western Hockey League. Spitfire scouting staff has that one. 7 goals, 22 assists in 23 games. He's ranked 11th on the Craigslist. Next wave, we featured on Ryan Chesley, a defenseman out of the U.S. program. Trevor Zimmer has this stay-at-home defenseman ranked 44th on Craigslist. And in Time Machine Ultimate Fantasy World Junior look ahead, Shane Wright and his role with Team Canada at this year's World Junior Championship. Don't forget to check out UFFsports.com, where you can link up to our Ultimate Sports NFTs.com website and check out all the cool things coming when it comes to NFTs that have utility in fantasy hockey. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Big thanks, of course, to Craig Button, who joins us every week with his passion and his knowledge, the director of scouting for TSN, the president of high-level scouting, and a big part of Duckman's domination. Thank you to you, the listeners, and the viewers as well. This has been Tracking the Draft, where the stars of tomorrow are discovered and discussed. See you next week.